briefly talk to our audience about hormones. What is your lab testing for, and why is it important for us to test for these hormones?
Right. So we're testing for cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And usually you would want to do 2 readings if you're concerned about your cortisol, AM and PM. So first thing when you wake up, and we do have a separate test for that, which is done on saliva. So you can collect 4 samples throughout the day, AM, midday, early evening, and then, 10:30 or 11:30 right before you go to sleep, because cortisol levels are higher in the morning and they do decrease throughout the day, and they should be lowest in the evening before bed. So if we see that, okay, your cortisol levels are really too high in the evening, that could be an indication you have too much stress, and it would result then in having problems sleeping, right? Because your cortisol levels are too high. And I suppose we've all had that experience where we're trying to sleep, but we're too excited about something. Our mind is racing. We can't we can't settle into that sleep mode. So when we get ourselves excited or stimulated, right before going to bed, even if it's an hour or so before, you may have a hard time falling asleep. It's because you start to produce cortisol, which is why, before going to bed, it's important to relax, not to eat right before going to bed, of course, because when we eat, we're going to get energy. We don't want that happening right before going to sleep. And just to create that atmosphere to help us fall asleep and have better sleep. Because sleep is super important, and it ties into what we're going to talk about, which is our brain function. So it's only when we sleep that our brain can clear out the debris of the entire day. Right? So if we're not getting good sleep, you're not going to feel well the next day. And if that continues, right, you're going to feel not well in your brain and your body, and everything is going to suffer. So sleep is very, very important. Sleep and, good nutrition. But I would have to say, if you're getting proper sleep, that will take care of a lot of down the line health issues or wellness and well-being that you're going to feel. So sleep is very important.
I love that you said that, because so often we reach for something outside ourselves that might even cost a little bit of money. And good sleep hygiene is something that we can all do, and it's free. So I love that.
Yes, because so when we sleep, and so our circadian rhythm is like that, it's in darkness complete darkness, that our pineal gland produces melatonin, right? Which is what regulates our sleep pattern. So personally, there were times when I've been going to bed at 1 or 2 a.m. just because of, workload, during COVID times, and when I tested my melatonin, and then I would be really tired in the morning, of course. But even if I wake up or I get going at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, I'm still tired, even though I did get 7 hours of sleep. But 7 hours of sleep from 2 a.m. to 9 a.m. is not the same as 7 hours of sleep from 10 a.m., to 6 or 7 a.m. So when I tested my levels, my cortisol level, they were not where they're supposed to be, and my melatonin levels were high in the morning when they're supposed to be high in the evening. So cortisol and melatonin work hand in hand. Cortisol is high in the morning, low in the evening. Melatonin's reverse. So my sleep pattern, I had to correct that. So
right.
Anyway, it's really important. I can't stress it enough to really try to get enough sleep, turn everything off, get to bed at a decent hour, and you'll see the difference in your own self, how you feel.
Absolutely. And for those of us that don't know what melatonin is that hormone that helps our bodies sleep and our brains go to rest. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Melatonin. Melatonin is actually a super antioxidant, right? Okay. In some studies, the researchers refer to it as the suicide antioxidant, not simply because it sacrifices itself to pick up free radicals in our entire system, but in particular the brain.
Wow.
Right? So because it's produced in the brain. So if we take melatonin orally, it will go through the gut and get to all our organs and act as a super antioxidant. But to get into the brain, it has to pass the blood-brain barrier. And only certain, chemicals or molecules can pass the blood-brain barrier depending on the size of it, right? So it's really better if we can produce melatonin in the brain, and that will help us to sleep.
Right. And the sleep is important, making sure that it's dark when we sleep. So before we go into these cortisol readings for Shannon and myself, Shannon's got a comment. Go ahead, hon.
Last time we talked about how we can overdo it on iron. Is melatonin one of those that we can overdo? Because there's melatonin supplements, right?
No, not that I have, not that I'm familiar with. No. Because we would, excrete it. It would not stay around and develop into something bad. No, so melatonin is fine. But you really don't want to take too much melatonin because you want your body to produce the melatonin. So if you take too much, then you're not giving your body a chance to produce melatonin. And so we could have another show where we talk about melatonin, and because that's a whole other metabolic pathway, how it's produced in the brain from tryptophan and so forth. But I can quickly say that tryptophan is a precursor of melatonin, and we need tryptophan in the brain in order for the brain to produce melatonin, or our pineal gland can produce melatonin. But for most of us, by the time we're in our 30s, our pineal gland can start getting calcified and not be producing enough. So there are certain foods we can get tryptophan from, and that's why, turkey being one of them, warm milk, which is why when you eat a large Thanksgiving dinner, you feel sleepy because you produce all that tryptophan, which gets converted into melatonin, makes you sleepy. And that's why long ago when, milk was milk, your mom would give you a warm glass of milk before going to bed because it has a lot of tryptophan in it. And tryptophan does cross the blood-brain barrier. And then that's how melatonin is produced in the brain and you fall asleep. So, and you get a good night's sleep, right?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
There's a lot to talk about there. Interesting, very interesting. But for today's session, yes, cortisol and melatonin work, hand in hand in the reverse sense.
Yeah. So let's talk about our cortisol levels. I'm just curious. You've got Shannon's. Who do you want to talk about first? Who's you got in front of you there?
Either. I think both of your levels were pretty much normal. You collected the bloods in the morning. I don't think right when you woke up, but, sometime thereabouts in the morning. Mm-hmm. And so, they're in the normal range, a little bit on the lower end of normal. So I don't know how both of you feel when you wake up in the morning. Are you ready to go, or do you need to get yourself into the readying to go,
I am rarely ready to do anything when my alarm goes off. Rarely.
I think we could all agree with that.
Yeah. And my level was a 7.4. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What was your, Shannon? What was your cortisol?
7.4.
So you're on the
And-
low end of the range. Yeah, because the
And
range
this
goes from
was-
6.7 to 22.6. So you're definitely at the low end of the range there. Yeah.
And it was about 10 o'clock in the morning when the sample was collected. So it wasn't first thing out of bed. So our cortisol, correct me if I'm wrong, doctor, it spikes, right? And then as the day goes, it decreases.
Yes.
So by 9 o'clock in the morning, I was already decreasing the levels, but it would be interesting to see first thing.
Yes. Right. It would be interesting for us to collect cortisol samples throughout the day to see how your levels do, right? In the morning and then at midday and evening, early evening, and then right before bed. And these would be saliva samples, so you can collect them and put them in the refrigerator. And then when you've collected the 4 for the day, you would ship them out the next day. And on those, we would do cortisol and melatonin studies to see how the levels compare.
Yeah. What I love about this is that oftentimes we're talking about getting our cortisol levels down, right? We have this high stress, high strung, fast paced world that we live in. And so oftentimes when I had my cortisol tested a year ago, Dr. Aloma, I hadn't even met you yet, but when we had him tested a year ago, mine was 28.
Oh dear, in the morning?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. I was I was doing a lot of, care for a very stressful situation with my family, and it showed up big time in my hormone levels. And so, of course, I spent some time working to get my cortisol levels down because I was just too high strung and I couldn't sleep. And then we have Shannon on the other end that is wanting to get her cortisol levels up. So that's why I think it's super important to do this test, because oftentimes people are like, I got to get my cortisol down. Well, sometimes we need to go the opposite direction with it and get it up. So I love that we're having this conversation.
And what were your levels? What are your levels now, Stephanie?
Okay, my levels now for cortisol are, I was just looking at it. I'm at 70. I'm sorry, I'm looking at testosterone. I was looking at the one. I'm at 11.7, which is right in the middle. Yeah.
Okay, so that's very good, and you can feel the difference, right, in yourself.
Oh wow. Like I said, I was at 28 a year ago. It was crazy. The doctor looked at me, he was like, under a little stress? I was like, you have no idea. And the crazy thing about it, when I did it a year ago, was that it literally, it went up as I was going to bed, and it's not supposed to go up as I'm going to bed. It's supposed to go down. And then it was really, really high in the mornings, which was telling her, you're actually stressing through the night. You're not sleeping. And it made sense because I was thrashing and tossing and turning and things like that. But the difference in my body is incredible. There was an anxious sort of anxiety that ran through my body all the time, followed by feelings of complete and utter depletion, like brain fog, heavy depletion that I just couldn't get past, was really struggling with. And what was happening is I was tapping everything else out. And so cortisol is the rescue hormone, right? I mean, if I've got to run from a bear, the body gives you a shot of, cortisol so that you can run from the bear. Well, everything else was exhausted. And the only thing that was dragging my body through the day was cortisol, and it was in overdrive, and it shouldn't have been. So yeah, I feel completely different. So it's not just about getting cortisol levels down. In Shannon's case, it's about getting cortisol levels up. So that's something super important that our listeners need to know, because it's such a vital hormone. And we call it the stress hormone, but there's times that we need more of it for sure. Is it possible that we could stress ourselves out so much so that gland no longer produces at the level that it needs to? Can we talk a little bit about that, like the burnout of that?
Burnout, yes, your adrenals, and if you're living on coffee or stimulants, but it can be corrected, right? Which is why we would want to do a full day study to see what the cortisol levels are doing, from morning to evening. So while you're awake, so we would want to do those. And
what other things? I just like to mention this because cortisol is often indicated in weight management. And and it's not just about sleep. So, it does affect weight. And I know that a lot of our listeners are interested in maintaining an optimal weight. And so that's something else that I thought was very beneficial for me to understand, because I had put on quite a bit of weight during the stressful period that I was taking care of family. And it's interesting because I put on like 35 pounds in like 6 months. It was crazy how much I packed on the weight. And I wasn't eating more. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even giving myself time to stop for meals because I was doing end of life care with my mother and taking care of my father as well, who's not, who requires some attention. So it can confuse people that, here I was probably eating less and moving faster, and my body went up in weight and not down. And so that's why this hormone check is super important, because it allows you to understand the significant role that hormones play. And mine, like I said, my stress was through the roof.
Which is why we look at multiple different markers and the hormones as well, so that we can get a picture of what's going on in that person. So we do gain weight when we're under stress because our other hormones stop working properly as well, because everything in our body, it's all interconnected. And so when something goes off balance, it throws off the other systems as well. So I think most of us can see, there may be sometimes if you're under stress that you may lose weight, but that something else is happening there. So a lot of times, as soon as we're under stress, we see right away we gain weight in the abdomen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where mine was. Absolutely. Awesome. I would love to dive deeper into that, but I know we're going to cover the whole hormone panel. So what's our next hormone that we need to look at?
We looked at DHEAS, but we can come back to that. We looked, of course, at insulin, correct? Mm-hmm. But perhaps we could start with estradiol, mm-hmm. which everybody's familiar with. Primarily, it's female hormone, but we also measure this hormone in males, mm-hmm. Because while in males estradiol is lower, it does need to be at a certain level. So, but primarily we look at estradiol levels is important for females, right? And this level changes throughout the cycle. Now, we're looking at, I believe, the levels here were fine. Definitely if you're perimenopausal, the level is going to be different. Post-menopausal, the level is going to be different. So I think our levels were fine.
I want to ask a question.
Stephanie, yes. Let me pull up your report.
Yeah.
I believe your level might have been a little bit low.
It was actually, but I am postmenopausal. It's been 2 years since I had a cycle. But I wanted to ask you about that.
Yes, I was surprised to see that your level.
It's 60.3. And the range goes from 19.3 all the way up to 662.
Yes.
So there's a lot of room for, changing and things through that time.
Right. So when you're ovulating, that's when it's the highest, right? So, but for somebody who's postmenopausal, so like myself, I am postmenopausal mm-hmm. as well. Mm-hmm. And last year, a year ago, my estradiol level was actually 0.
Okay.
0.00000. There was nothing there.
Okay. Yeah. So, and I wanted, I don't know if I said this on my report, but I am doing a transdermal bioidentical hormone. And so that's probably where that is coming in, because I was struggling so badly with a lot of menopause symptoms. And so when I worked with my practitioner, we did a transdermal that's, putting on the skin bioidentical hormone. And that's probably where you're seeing that. And I just wanted to let you know that, because people are like, where's that coming from? And yours was 0 and I'm postmenopausal and mine's not. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Yes.
So that be aware of that when you're doing the tests, that pay attention to what you are currently taking and what you're doing. I'm curious about Shannon because I know Shannon has dealt with endometriosis her whole life. So let's talk about hers.
Yeah, I have all kinds of things. One, I believe my cholesterol was slightly elevated. Scroll down here to the lipid. Yes, slightly elevated. And now we need cholesterol to make estrogen, right? And my estradiol came in at 235.9. Again, the range being 19. Well, let me break this down a little bit more for the listeners.
Do you remember around what day in the cycle you were?
Yes, I was day 22.
Okay.
I looked that up and made sure that I made note of it for our conversation. So non-pregnant adult female, luteal phase, 25.8 to 279 at 236. So relatively speaking, it's on the higher end, but it's a lot better than it used to be. I used to have estrogen off the charts, off the paper, and my cortisol wasn't even registering. So my numbers are starting to, come back. At least they're within range now. They're not crazy.
When you say cortisol was not registering on the lower end or the higher?
It was very, 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 very low.
Oh,
very low.
Okay.
Very, very low.
Okay.
Very low.
So you're doing better. Much better.
I'm doing a lot better. And that shows in my symptoms, right? So I don't have as tender breasts because my estrogen isn't really high. I don't have incredibly pain. And when I say incredibly pain, I'm talking bedridden, nauseous, vomiting from the pain, ridiculous amount of bleeding. You go through a super tampon every hour on the hour and you wear a pad just in case bleeding. Like when you can bring your estrogen down into a healthier range, a lot of these symptoms start to go away on their own. And I've read that there's foods that we eat that help contribute to building progesterone and estrogen. And also fasting can help contribute to increasing cortisol. So when women do decide to do intermittent fasting, and they are speaking with a dietitian or a nutritionist, it's important to keep some of these things in mind because, as we've already said, it's all intertwined and it does have an impact on our bodies and our cycles. So even if a woman does not have endometriosis or adenomyosis or PCOS or anything that is hormone related, it's important to remember that just a little tweak in the diet and the intermittent fasting can have an impact on it, good or bad. So giving your doctor as much information as possible is always helpful in any kind of treatment or anything really.
Thank you for sharing, Shannon. Yes, I was happy. Well, I don't know happily. Your blood, your hormone levels and your blood results, were good, and I was glad to see that. I do want to come back to one thing about the post-menopausal and my estradiol being 0. Mm-hmm. You don't want it to be 0. You should have some estrogen, right? So I was concerned that mine was 0. It was 0.000. We could go all the way down to 6 decimal points. There really was no estrogen there. Or estradiol, right? So estrogen is made up of estradiol, estrone, and free estriol. So those make up the estrogens, but estradiol is the primary hormone. So I was able to bring that level up to about in 70, 72. I have to go back and look at it over the year, and I still have to go back and hone in on what exactly I did that made that change. because I did change several things. So for another conversation, but I just wanted to let our listeners know that, you having a zero estradiol is not what you're going for. Just because you're postmenopausal,
Really?
Your estrogen should not be zero. You should have some estrogen there, right? I do take a progesterone cream, so it's just progesterone. So just a dab every day. And my progesterone levels as well were down, but now they're where they're supposed to be.
Yeah. So that's good to know. So even though you're postmenopausal, because I am 2 years postmenopausal, so you don't want it to be zero. You definitely want it to be in the low end of the range, but you don't want it to be zero. And maybe that's the reason why my practitioner recommended the transdermal estrogen. And I'm doing an estrogen progesterone combination so that the two, complement each other. And we can talk about how important that is because, as you know, Dr. Geer, every hormone affects the other hormones, and we want to make sure that we keep them in balance. So mine is a combo. That's good to know because I just assumed if I was postmenopausal that I wouldn't be able to make it anymore. So the fact that you did some lifestyle changes and probably some dietary changes and were able to bring yours from a zero up to the 70s, that's an intriguing conversation that we might not have time to explore today. But I find that very interesting because I think I was told or it just made the assumption, nope, you're postmenopausal, you'll never make it again. Let's talk about a cream. So interesting.
It shouldn't be high because too much estrogen, of course, can cause, certain types of cancer. And you don't want it to be too high when you're postmenopausal or any time actually, but in particular for postmenopausal women. But you should have some there on the lower end. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you. That was information I didn't have. So, all right, let's look at the next one in our hormone panel.
So we can jump to progesterone.
Okay.
So because, estrogen, estradiol, progesterone, and then testosterone. So progesterone, Shannon's was perfect, right? Shannon, are you happy with your progesterone level? Is she there?
Yeah.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Oh, there we go. I can see that the range is 5.16 up to 18.5, and I'm at 7.48. So a little bit lower, but given the phase of my cycle, I think it's good.
Yes. And right. You feel fine, right? And then all your other hormones as well are in balance. So, my progesterone is fine. I don't remember the number, and I don't have my report here.
Yeah. Mine was
yours, I think, was a little
high for postmenopausal, but it says postmenopausal is between 0 and 0.78, and mine was 0.84, but I am on HRT. Yes. I am on HRT, and it was 0.84, so it was just a little bit higher than that range, but I am on the transdermal hormone cream. So
and that's fine. A little bit higher progesterone is fine. You just don't want your estradiol to be too high.
Okay.
So that's okay.
That's exciting. That's good to know because I was going to ask you that. I'm like, oh shit, did I screw it up, Dr. Geer?
No.
And so that's good to know. Yeah. So
you're fine. Yes.
Yeah. And before we move on to the next hormone, I know that women and men, but we talk about estradiol and estrogen and progesterone as reproductive hormones. But I just want to speak a little bit about these are not just reproductive hormones. These are wellness hormones. They affect our moods. They affect our sleep patterns. They affect our energy. They affect our bone density. They affect, fat metabolism and so many things like that. So I just want people to know that we're not just talking about whether or not we can conceive a child or whether or not we're having regular cycles. But could you just speak a little bit about that, about how much they affect other functions of the body? And it's not just about whether or not, we're having regular cycles and, can procreate and, carry a baby and things like that.
Right. Well, for example, we had a case where this was a younger female, 19 years old, and severe mood swings, really terrible moods, the worst, just horrible, horrible, horrible. And when we tested her, of course, all her hormone levels, testosterone was off, testosterone very high. So classic, polycystic ovaries, right? Her diagnosis. But so her mom started her, under the care of a hormone specialist doctor, on hormone therapy, and those levels came down, right? But they were still not down. But what we found, and just still her moods were totally really bad, impossible to be around, right? Just really, really bad moods, terrible mood swings, just awful. And her vitamin D levels were critically low, right? So, and her mom said, well, I'm surprised because I'm giving her a topical vitamin D. It comes in a lotion that has vitamin D in it and supposed to be absorbable through the skin. Well, for whatever reason, she was not absorbing it, whether it's, the compound was not in an absorbable form, the lotion. So once she was able to correct or increase her vitamin D levels, we saw a lot of other, the hormones rebalanced themselves and her mood changed, completely. I mean, this child was really the critical level of low vitamin D. So, the hormones, as we would call female hormones or male hormones, so everything works in a balance, and it's not only for reproduction purposes. While that is very important, and your hormones would need to be balanced, like we're going to look at FSH and LH levels, right, which will tell us about which is your reproductive status and chance of conceiving, and you would have to correct those balances if you're planning to have a child. But they're important to maintain your well-being even if you are not planning to have a child.
Yeah.
Okay? Because, it's important for your mood and prevention of developing cancer, different types of cancers. That's why if you were to have ovaries removed or a full hysterectomy, you would need to really talk with your doctor about maintaining your hormone levels where they're supposed to be at that time in your life.
Awesome. And is it true that even past menopause, that your ovaries and your uterus still play a role in hormone balance, even when you're post-menopausal?
Yes.
I know that so often I hear, I don't need them anymore. And so I chose to get rid of them. And I'm like, but aren't they still playing a vital role in our health? And I think they are.
Yes. Yes, they are. Which is why after, if a woman has had her ovaries removed or has had a full hysterectomy, her physician will want to talk to her about HRT.
Okay. Right? All right.
Because if you don't have those organs, you're not producing any of the hormones. Although you need them in lower amounts, you're not producing them at all, and you do need them.
Yeah. And you're a good example of, you were able to do it, through some lifestyle changes because you saw your levels go up. I just want to make one comment. I read an article sometime recently when I was looking at my own hormones, and I saw a study where having progesterone levels, they used some HRT with progesterone, and they actually found a improvement in bone density for postmenopausal women.
Yes.
In bone density. And I know that osteoporosis is a big fear for a lot of postmenopausal women. And so it's not just about your calcium and your vitamin D to feed those bones. It's actually about our hormones as well.
You're absolutely correct. Yes.
Yeah. And I thought that was interesting that it affected this progesterone, getting those levels up. to levels that were healthy for postmenopausal women actually did increase. They did bone scans and increased their bone density over the course of like an 18-month cycle, which I thought was super interesting.
Yeah.
So
I remember with your vitamin D for older women, you probably would need to take it with a higher level of K2.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, so are there any other hormones we want to talk about right now before we move to the brain chemicals?
Well, testosterone, women, we need some testosterone, right? Not a high level, because then that would mean you have a hormone imbalance, because women are not supposed to have high levels of testosterone. I think everybody's was okay. In this particular test, we would test more. We would test in males. We would test total testosterone, free testosterone, determine bioavailable testosterone, and the percent of bioavailable testosterone. So that would be customized for if the individual was male. Okay.
So let's talk about the male. So what's the difference between free testosterone, and bioavailable testosterone? Because if I'm a male and I go and get my testosterone changed and they said it's great, if this test does a little bit deeper dive, what's the difference between bioavailable testosterone and just the regular testosterone level?
Right.
Can you explain that?
So we would measure total testosterone. So that tells you testosterone that is bound to other proteins, which testosterone has a tendency to bound to sex hormone binding globulin, okay, and albumin. So when you measure total testosterone, you're getting the level of testosterone that is bound and that is free. So we can measure free testosterone, or you can measure sex hormone binding globulin and albumin and then calculate how much free testosterone is present, right? So the free testosterone is what you want to know, because that's the testosterone that's actually available to that man for use. So once you have your free testosterone level, then you can calculate how much is bioavailable, which is the true amount that is available. And so sometimes we do see that, if your total testosterone is on the lower end, your free testosterone is going to be on the lower end as well, right? So, because when you look at all of those levels, then the practitioner would be able to decide, okay, does this man need to be on testosterone replacement therapy? And a lot of times you can see that they do. Sometimes we see high cholesterol with low testosterone, right? And high blood pressure, high cholesterol, low vitamin D, high blood pressure, and low testosterone. So you have to look at everything before, you can say, okay, this is what this person needs to do. So.
And for a man, because I know we're all women here talking, for a man, what might be some symptoms that I might decide, hey, I should go get my testosterone checked? Like, is it fatigue? Does it affect sex drive?
Yes, fatigue, low libido, maybe sweating at nights, or sweating. Sometimes that could be, and definitely high blood pressure and high cholesterol could lower your testosterone as well. So, see how you feel. If you feel low energy, just no strength, stamina, tiredness, you don't feel well. So testosterone is really important in men as well for muscle mass and overall health. So as we age, testosterone levels in men do go down. So that level, although for males it's 300 to 700 is the normal range, Depending on your age, that normal range is going to be lower. But definitely it's worth checking, and you would need to ensure that you're looking at total and free at a bare minimum before deciding on any course of action. But I will say exercise will increase your testosterone levels.
Excellent.
It's a natural way, an easy way to increase your testosterone levels before going on, any type of replacement therapy.
And I had also read, I did a bunch of reading on intermittent fasting, and I read also that intermittent fasting can also have a positive effect on men's testosterone levels.
Yes.
So very cool.
Intermittent fasting is just all around good thing to do. And if you're thinking, okay, well, I shouldn't eat throughout the day or things like that. So if you have an early dinner, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and you don't eat anything until, the next morning, that's fasting as well. That's intermittent fasting, right? So no midnight snacks, no late night snacks. So that would be an easy way to start. And then you can do more where you're fasting, while you're awake and doing things.
Awesome.
Right. So just wanted to just mention that.
Yeah, that is, and it's doable. Like you said, that one's attainable. So
yes,
very
just
good.
No late night snacks or midnight snacks. You get hungry, just have water with lemon juice in it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good thing.
And it will curb your appetite. So maybe you don't really need to eat anything.
Yeah. Yeah. And water with lemon juice in it's great for so many things. It's a detoxifier. It's a blood tonic. It does a lot of good things. So very good. Awesome. I'm glad we took the time to talk about testosterone, because I know a lot of our listeners are going to be like, yeah, but what about the other half? And so that was very beneficial. Okay. So I'm actually excited to talk about brain function.